This is a podcast about our lived experience, which unfortunately includes infant death and subsequent mental health struggles. Please take good care of yourself and only listen if this content feels safe for you right now. We'll still be here when you're ready.
Hi, I'm Judith.
And I'm Alina. We both lost babies to SIDS in winter 2021.
In the throes of grief, I reached out to a stranger on the internet and our friendship was born.
In the years since, we've been working hard to survive, rebuild, and navigate the continual challenges that have come our way, including divorce,
Job loss,
dating while bereaved,
moving multiple times,
health scares,
pregnancy and parenting a living child,
starting new jobs, and so much more.
We are tired.
Happily ever after is out of the question for us, but this podcast documents our journeys to happier ever after because we believe life after loss is worth living.
So join us as we laugh, cry until we laugh.
Welcome to As Long as I'm Living podcast.
We're so glad you're here.
Hi, everyone. This is Judith, Aiden's mom.
And I'm Alina, Quinn's mom.
And this is the second episode in a 3-part series where we interview my sister, Ilana.
And if you listened to last week's episode, you know it's intense. It's a tearjerker, to say the least. We're literally crying the whole time. This one is the same. It's fantastic, and I can't wait for you to listen. If you missed last week's episode, go listen to that one first so you get all the context before you go into this one.
We're going to have one more episode in this series next week, and we look forward to seeing you there.
Enjoy.
And I remember, obviously the first few days were horrible. And then, Aiden's funeral, we were waiting for a date for when the funeral was going to be. And we didn't know when it was going to be. I had already been in LA for 4 days. And I was like, maybe I should just go home. And for what felt like the first time in 4 days, Judith looked at me and said, "How could you go home?" And I said, and I was paused, and then you said, "But you being here is painful for me. It makes it more painful." So I was like, "Well, then I should go home." And then you're like, "Well, how can you go home? Don't you need to be here for Aiden's funeral?" And I think that conversation, it just summed it up. Like, where was I supposed to be?
It was hard, Judith, for you to have her there, and also it would have been so painful for her to leave for you.
I felt like it wasn't even about me. It was like, How could you not be there for his funeral? Like, forget about me. He's a person too. And he needs you to be there for his funeral. And so the thought that you were going to leave, I felt like, I know this is hard for you, but you have an obligation to him to be there. I didn't, I now I can put myself in Ilana's shoes and I feel so much empathy because it must have been horrible. I know it was horrible because her husband came. And her husband came because it was so bad that her husband flew out. So bad after you said to me that I needed to stay for Aiden. And obviously I wanted to be there for Aiden, but I didn't want to be there if I was causing you more pain. You were in so much pain. So then, as usual, my knight in shining armor comes. And he did the right thing. And he took me to a hotel, so I wasn't in the house. And I spent time away from the home, and I recalibrated a little bit, and I went to the beach, and the beach was very soothing. We went shopping. My brother was getting married 2 months later, and I remember they all went shopping for suits, and I was so angry. Furious. But I think we just needed air. I get it. Now I get it, but at the time I was like, "You're gonna go shopping for suits?" Yeah. What are you doing? I know. You're gonna go shopping for suits? And my mom was like, "I needed them to do this for me." And then I was like, "What does that even mean?" I couldn't. It felt to me like the whole universe was stopping, but they were not stopping. Yeah. They bought bins. They went to the mall. I don't even know what they did, but my entire planet had stopped and I could not breathe, and they were continuing life around it. Yeah. And it hurt so much that they just kept living life. And I get it,
your life didn't stop. But I think for me in that moment, it became very clear that I was alone in this.
Mm-hmm.
And it hurt so much that somebody that like was supposed to be in it with me just couldn't be in it. And I know I don't think I spoke to you very much. I don't think I said a word. I don't remember. Maybe I spoke to you one time or two times, but people were coming in and out. Like my friends were coming and I would talk to them and I wouldn't talk to Ilana. Like Miriam would come, Julia would come, and I would talk to them, but I wouldn't talk to Ilana.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think those few days, honestly, were like the beginning of the next set in our relationship and the next few months of just, I couldn't do it. I wasn't her grieving partner. I didn't understand. I had live children. I was going to ultrasound appointments. I was going to the OBGYN. I had obligations. And I don't know. I think I have like a very high bar for myself. And I think I did the best I could for me, for my family, for my patients, for my sister. But I know I let her down. And I don't even know in retrospect if there's anything I could have done differently other than stick around. But when I think back on it, I think I handled everything else pretty well, but the relationship between us and helping her was unbelievably difficult, and I don't think I did a good job. And Judith told me on a frequent basis, and that's okay. Because I don't even know if there could have been anything better. It was impossible.
I remember, I also have to say that those days, I kept leaving in the morning, like kept leaving the house in the morning. Like I kept running away.
Yeah.
But I remember one morning what triggered it was I was sitting in the bed and with my mom and my sister came in. I don't remember what, but my mom said something about, and when I go to Ilana's for the baby, I was like, what? And then she was like, yeah, when Ilana has the baby, I'm going to help. And I just was like, I just remember being like my mom at that moment she was literally keeping me alive. And she was just like, yeah, I have to go to Ilana's to help when she has the baby. And like, I think that it was just so clear. Like in that moment, like it just hurt so much. It's hard to explain like the rage and the anger and the just pure pain that I, even now, like remembering it, it hurts. It hurts so much. And so I ended up running away to this woman's house who lost 2 daughters because I didn't know anyone else who had lost a child. So I landed on this person's doorstep and she took me in and I told her, I said, my mom's going to leave me to go to my sister's alive baby. And she was like, and she had lost 2 daughters. And she was like, but Judith, that's your sister. She kept saying, that's your sister. You know, your mom has 2 children and she has to help one and she has to help the other. And she's like, that's your sister. You can't be angry at your sister. Like she had lost a set of sisters. And so every time I was so angry and so hurt, and she kept just saying to me, but that's your sister. Like, it hurts so much. Like, she was like very clear, you know, like she's like, you have to work on this relationship with your sister. Like, it's everything. So you should know, Ilana, that the other Ilana was rooting for you. And even when I was like so angry and I was like, but she has alive children. She doesn't need my mom. She has everything. She doesn't need my mom. She wants more. She has 2 alive children. She's going to have a 3rd alive child and she needs my mom. Like, I have nothing. Nothing. And she's going to leave me here. Like, Ilana has everything. She has everything. And I have nothing. I think that that's kind of how I looked at it from that moment on until for many, 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 many months after. Ilana has everything and I have nothing.
How does it feel to hear Judith say that?
Oh, I've heard it before. Because she would say to me, you live a golden life. You live a perfect life. And I do. I'm so blessed to have live children.
I also used to say your biggest problem is me. Imagine being me. I used to say that too.
And you're right. Like, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Yeah.
Ilana, it's not your fault, you know?
No, it's not my fault. And there was no one gave me a roadmap to follow on how to handle this. And probably my own mistake was not reaching out for help for myself. And I talked to people. I talked to my friends. I talked to my friends that were psychologists, and no one said to me, like, maybe you should speak to someone professionally. And
but
then
eventually you got a therapist because your therapist told you that you can't. Ilana one time told me, she was like, my therapist told me that you can't stay this. It's very hard to stay this level of upset for long. So I just have to wait for things to get better because you're not going to be able to sustain this level of anger towards me. That's what you told me.
Yeah, but I got a therapist because of you. Because when mommy and daddy were separating, you said to me, I cannot be the sounding board for that problem. I have enough problems. You need to find someone else to talk to about our parents.
That was good advice.
That was good advice.
And
Judith, you were living with your parents who were getting divorced. Oh my God.
Well, me and Judith, I think we found a lot of neutral topics, right? We talked about the weather. We talked about what we were eating for dinner.
Yeah.
We talked about my patience, my adolescent patience.
Nice. Good to see.
Ilana, so Ilana went home. So let's say that was the funeral. You went home like the day after the funeral or something. And then did you think on the way home, you're like, well, that did not go as expected. What now?
Not only but like you were about to see her again for your brother's wedding.
Yeah, I don't think I remember thinking that didn't go as expected. I remember feeling horrible. I can't help her. I'm supposed to help her. And I can't help her. And I don't know how to help her. And I don't know what to say to her. And now I don't know what I can do for her. And like I just felt so broken that there was nothing I could do to solve this, or to help you, or to even make you feel better. Like, nothing I could do to make you feel better. Zero.
And so you got home, and I have to say, like, you tried to kind of continue with calling me and talking to me. And I didn't always answer.
And sometimes, I'm going to be honest, I was relieved when you didn't answer, because I didn't know what to say. And like in the middle of the day, I remember we had one phone call in the middle of the day during my lunch break, so an hour and a half of crying and on the phone in my car, and then it was really hard to go back to work after that.
Yeah.
But we did keep calling, and we did keep texting, and I think the only reason that we are where we are today in terms of our relationship is because we maintained that level of contact. Like, we weren't going to let go of this relationship, even if it meant we talked about the weather.
It was hard. I didn't want to answer the phone. I never wanted to answer it. I felt like I didn't know what to say. Also, it just felt like it was so cruel. Like, I felt like the other friends in my life, there were certain people that just made me feel so jealous, so angry and so jealous and so hurt, and the other ones I could just not talk to. I didn't have to see, I didn't have to communicate with. The hard part about family is that you do. So I couldn't not. She was there, and this baby was coming. Her baby was coming, and so it was like I would not answer the phone call, like, for a few days, but I had to eventually answer. It wasn't going away. She wasn't going to go away, and I wasn't going to go away. So we just kept with this, like, really kind of awkward,
fraught,
weird conversation. We just kept going, and then I went to your house for my brother's wedding, and it was horrible. It was, like, even worse. And actually, the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because when we talk about, like, our bottom story of, like, when I was, like, at the bottom, it was when I threw our brother's wedding cake at your walls. But it never occurred to me like, well, then Ilana came into her kitchen and there was wedding cake on the walls.
Yeah.
So
Whatever. I mean, that, I know that was your bottom story, but that like wasn't the bottom for me. The bottom for me was when you said, why didn't you think that I should sleep here? Why didn't you think that I should sleep across the street? Why didn't you think that I should sleep in a hotel? And it honestly had not occurred to me that you should sleep in a hotel. I didn't have a baby at that point. There was like all these wedding festivities, like so many parties, that I was either hosting or planning. And we were switching house, we were staying somewhere for the weekend and somewhere else for Sunday and Monday. And like, it honestly didn't occur to me. It had occurred to me to sleep like across the street, but then my neighbor told me that her niece was coming and I was like, that's not a good idea. But it never even occurred to me. So I think my bottom was like when you literally looked at me and you're like, why didn't you think that I should sleep at a hotel? Like, why did you think it was a good idea to sleep here? And that, it hurt.
because
I think it hurt because I thought my home was always a place of refuge for you. And like coming here, seeing my family intact, this family that you're part of, right? These children that you are their closest aunt, that we couldn't, the same thing. Like, not only could we not provide comfort, we were causing more angst.
Yeah. Well, I have this other memory, which is that there was this one time when I was in the shower and I came out and I like collapsed on the floor of the bathroom of your shower, and your husband came in and found me in a towel on the floor, and he was like, I gotta go get Ilana. Like, he found me and he was like, oh, I'm gonna go get Ilana. You remember that?
Yeah. And then I sat with you on the floor.
What did he think you were gonna do?
I think he wasn't going to do anything, so I guess I was the person to come sit next to you, and I did. I sat next to you.
Like, there's a naked woman on my bathroom floor. Someone should deal with this.
Right. No, but I sat next to you on the floor. I remember
you did
that.
sit next to me on the floor
For a long time until.
And you said to me, "You're like, I want to be there for you. I want you to be here because I want to be here for you." And I just remember being like, "What are you gonna do for me? What are you gonna do for me?" Everywhere I looked was this family that was functional, that was happy, that was operating, that was alive. It was just like it was just every time I was near your family, it was a reminder of everything I didn't have.
And that was even before.
That was
your
even
nephew
before the baby was
born.
born.
I
So
think
the baby was born.
The baby was born.
we have to go before the baby was born, because the one thing that I did do for Judith, and I would like to think I did it right, was I planned her trip to Hawaii.
You did. Well, there are two things. There are two things that you did. First of all, I told Ilana I don't want to be in the country while you have your baby. The mainland. Hawaii is part of the country. And Ilana planned my entire trip to Hawaii. She did an amazing, amazing job. And I have to say that was a saving grace, because I did find out that she had a baby boy when I was driving off the side of a cliff. And I thought to myself, well, like, I should stop because it is so beautiful here. And it made it just a little bit better that I was there and I was not in America. And so my mom being gone for the week, like, in the end, it was okay because I was gone too. But I did find out she had a boy, and that was very hard. But the other thing I'll say is that we did have a conversation about the baby naming.
Yes.
And I said to you, you're having a baby. Have you thought about what you want to do about naming it? And I said, the only thing that I really want to request is that you don't name your baby after our grandmother, because Aiden was named after our grandmother. And I wanted that to be special because she had died 3 weeks before he was born. And I just wanted that to be special for him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that was hard because at least I think this is my last child. And so I wanted to name my baby after my grandma because of all the relatives, I was the closest to her.
It was not a fair request.
Yeah.
But I appreciate it.
I remember I called Aunt Joyce, and Aunt Joyce was like, well, maybe you could name the baby something with an A because of her middle name, Alberta. Aiden. She's like, you think Judith would be upset if you named your baby after the middle name that Grandma hated? And I said, no. Judith said, no, I can't do it. So we made alternative plans. And I think that was the right thing.
I appreciated that you listened.
Yeah, and it was hard because we wanted to name him something. You want to name something based on how you're feeling at that moment, and life at that moment was so dark.
Yeah.
And we were trying to come up with names that meant light. Because
and I
everything
asked
was
if you
so
were going to name
dark.
the baby for Aiden, and you said no.
I know.
Did you want her to name the baby after Aiden, or you didn't want her to name the baby after Aiden?
I understood why she wouldn't want to.
Yeah.
I understood why she wouldn't want to. I think it would have meant a lot, but I also would have I really understood that.
Yeah.
I really understood that.
I thought you were going to be so disappointed, but I just couldn't do it. I mean, I asked, we talked about it, we asked people, like a baby that died at 3 months, you know.
Yeah.
But it just...
I
Already,
understood.
we were going to look at this baby and think about him. So it would be so much harder if we looked at this baby and said a name that was similar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then the baby was born, and just to fast forward a little bit, I feel like there were a few other things I asked for, and I'm only going to say this because I think there are a lot of people out there that have a best friend that having a baby or a sibling having a baby. Another thing I asked for was that you guys made a new family WhatsApp group and that you shared all pictures of the baby on that group. Like, I did not need to be seeing all these, like, avocado eating baby pictures, you know? Yeah. And you did do that, and for a long time, I didn't get a picture of him.
I think probably a year.
More. I think more. The first one I got was when you were in Costa Rica, and I remember being like, "Why did you send this? Why is this here?" But I eventually I got over it. I don't know how old he was when you went to Costa Rica, but when was that?
Like before a year, but
that was the first one, and I was like, "Oh no, I'm not ready for this."
Yeah,
that was at yeah. So that was one. That was another thing that you did do. You put all the pictures elsewhere, and I appreciated that a lot. And like all this time, it just felt like I would try and articulate my needs, and it felt like it just wasn't translating. Like they didn't know what to do. They couldn't support me. It felt like they weren't listening. I just like I kept feel like I feel like at one point I wrote out a script of what I wanted you guys to say. It's just like wasn't working.
It wasn't working.
You
asked me also on your list was that when I talked to you on the phone that you didn't want to hear a baby in the background.
Hey, that's a reasonable request. I'm just putting that out there.
And also, I can imagine hard to fulfill, as reasonable as it is, given that you had a little baby.
It was. I think that I did the best that I could. I thought it was reasonable. It was also sometimes very hard to it was very hard to fulfill. Like you think you put the baby to sleep. Then you go call your sister, and then the baby wakes up. Yeah, you know.
And also, I mean, like, how did you deal with the fact that you had an infant, and now you were like very aware of SIDS? Did that make you more anxious about SIDS, or not really? I don't really remember you being very anxious about SIDS.
I remember first of all, I slept in the room with the baby. The baby was in the crib, and I slept in the bed next to the crib. And I remember one day I fell asleep trying to feed the baby, and I woke up and the baby was in my arms and we were in the rocking chair, and I was like, oh, I'm done breastfeeding, and I stopped breastfeeding that day. Because I mean I pumped after that, but like I did not trust myself to feed this baby and stay awake at 3:00 in the morning. So I stopped because I was so petrified. And then one day I must have been having a very hard time because Adam's like, maybe you have a little bit of postpartum anxiety. And I said, I think I have post-Aiden anxiety. And I think he left the room.
Well, also your baby had RSV once, and he was at the hospital.
Yeah,
and you were
that
like,
was bad.
And I like was having a very hard time, and I was like, you said to me like, don't worry, Judith, nothing's gonna happen to him. I'm right here. And I was like, I think I hung up the phone and walked out.
Mm-hmm.
I think you did too.
I was like,
but I meant like I was here in the hospital, not.
yeah.
And
But what it sounded like to me was so naive.
You thought I meant like I can save him.
Yeah.
But what I meant was I'm not at home with a blue baby. I'm in the hospital. So we have oxygen and we're here in the hospital. We have what we need to take care of him. That's what I had meant. Because he had been at home and was not the right color. And
Yeah.
Well, how did it feel? This was the first baby that I was not engaged in at all.
I was going to say, I think that's the thing that is the most, that I wanted to ask you the most, Ilana, is how it feels. Because you love all your children equally, I'm sure. And it's just so hard for Judith to be around, at least, especially in the beginning. I know it's getting better and better over time, but for her to be around one of your children in particular. And as we said at the beginning of the episode, Judith was such an oversized presence in your first two kids' lives, making their birthday cakes and going to their graduations and all of that. And that is not true for your youngest. And how does that feel?
So thankfully to this podcast, he heard Judith's voice every day in the car on our way to school and on the way home. I would always play your podcast so that he would know your voice. And we talked about you, and like I understood that you didn't want to see him, and I understood that when you came that August, which was right after your New Hampshire baby escapade in the woods without Wi-Fi.
She's talking about our first annual grief retreat where I could have murdered her, but I didn't.
Yeah. She came to my house for one night and she slept across the street and she didn't want to see him. And so we, like, whatever. She came over after he went to sleep. And then the next day, I don't know, you did want to see him. And I wasn't home. He was home with Adam. And we, like, gave you time with him, which we understood. And, I mean, it was very hard, but I knew he was just a baby. Like, I knew with time things were going to get better. And that it wasn't going to be like this forever. I knew it.
Yeah.
And how do you feel about it now? Do you feel like that's true?
Yeah, very much so. First of all, I don't know, you came to visit. This is just another memory. You came to visit. Maybe he was 9 months old. And you stayed at your friend's house, and that was fine. Yeah. And you came to visit, and you wanted to see him, and you called him Pup, like he was a little puppy. You just kept calling him Pup, and I thought that was odd, but okay, whatever you want.
I think something else that is so special from the outside, something that has been so special is that Judith's daughter and your son are, from what I hear, obsessed with each other. Like, they run around like little peers and just like have an absolute blast. And I think obviously it's hard to, I can imagine, watch that relationship and not see the lack of Aiden there. But also Judith's daughter probably wouldn't be here if Aiden were here. At least not at that age, and maybe her soul would be here, but not at that specific age. And so it's extremely complicated. But his little best buddy, I almost said her name, your daughter, right, wouldn't exist.
You know, it's so interesting because whenever they're together, I always think about it like Aiden would be here, like running around in circles, screaming at the top of his lungs with them. But never in my imagination would your daughter not be there. I don't know. In my mind, you were going to have two kids 12 months apart.
Could have.
I really hope I didn't do that.
I don't think you would have done it on purpose. Let's put it that way.
I don't know. I think that our kids have very complementary personalities. Like, their personalities are very different. Yeah. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm sure Aiden and him would have been best friends. And then sometimes I'm like, well, maybe they wouldn't have been as close because it just happens to be that these two kids have like very complementary personalities. Or maybe I think the three, I just don't know, but I think about it every time they're together, when they're in the bath or whatever they do. And, and I feel like what I would recommend to other people who are in the situation is to give yourself a lot of grace about it. Like, you don't have to go see this kid on any timeline, but my recommendation would be, if you decide to see them in private, because I felt like if I saw him in public, if I met him in public, I felt like whenever I met him, whenever I was around him and other people were around us, that they were looking at me.
Mhm.
Everyone was looking at me to see if I was okay. And
Yeah.
sometimes I wasn't. And being able to meet him in private gave me like the space and the privacy to respond however I needed to respond, without the pressure of being like, you know, I don't know what the pressure would have been, but that was a good piece of advice that I would share. And then I would also say, for a long time, I didn't stay in your house. I would stay across the street. Even now, like, it just kind of, with my husband, there's like a lot of people in the house. So I would say, especially when my mom was living there too, like if you're gonna spend time with your family, have a place that you can retreat to in privacy. If you're gonna be around these kids that you know that are painful for you, retreat in privacy. And I also, like, his birthday would come every year, and it was really hard for me. Like,
you know how most kids' birthdays come every year.
yeah, and it's hard. It's a
you know?
reminder. It's a reminder. And I asked for help getting his birthday gift. Even now, I ask for help. Like, I say, like, it's just too painful for me. Like, someone else take care of it, and I'll Venmo them. Pick a gift, sign my name. Whereas, like, with the other kids, like, I sit there and I'm like, but do they like the 8-year-old joke books, or should I maybe get them like a friendship making? Like, I love gifts because it's my love language, but for this baby, like, it's painful, and I don't make his birthday cake. There are just things that I do that even now are hard. It's hard. It's just hard. It's hard, but I think the entire time I didn't want it to be so painful to be with my family. I wanted our family to be able to spend time together and enjoy it. And so I feel like that was like my eye on the prize. My prize was that this was like a means to an end. Building a relationship with him was a means to an end, and the end was spending time with my family. And that is important. And it's hard to explain, because the feeling that I felt towards her, I didn't feel towards anyone else. No one else did I feel like this, just like searing hatred. I didn't hate her, but just like jealousy of her life. And Ilana, you told me it's because we were so close to begin with, and it just felt so unfair like all of it. And I try, when I think about it, I try to remember that God or the universe or whoever decides who lives and who dies is not comparing two girls from one family. Like, statistics aren't like 2 girls from one family, one will get and one will not. They're looking at like 7 billion people, and some get and some don't get. And some have and some do not. But when it felt very much so like she gets everything and I get nothing. But I'll say, like, just thinking about when things started to change for me, and you could say when things started to change for you, was actually when the podcast started, because I felt like during the podcast, you could understand a window into what was going on in my life more. And when you could have this podcast, you could learn what I needed, or the language that I was using. And you would come to me and you would say, Judith, I heard this on the podcast. It was really interesting when you said that.
I was listening, and it also gave you a space to express yourself without speaking to one person.
Yeah. I feel like the podcast really helped.
And I think also finding Alina really helped. I think finding someone that you could call, so there wasn't this expectation that I was going to be helpful.
Right.
That's true, actually.
That's true. I
feel like every time we spoke, I was a disappointment, and I felt that way for myself. Yes. And now all of a sudden you had somebody who got it. Because the thing is, I think for me, that I had seen children die before. I had worked in a hospital. I had seen sick children. I knew that this existed. And I think not that it made it feel better, obviously, when this child's in your family and part of you, it's different. But on some level, I had grappled with the unfairness of life and death already a little bit.
Yeah.
And so just because I had dealt with it psychologically and come to terms with whatever that means, doesn't mean I can help somebody else get to that point. Because it hadn't happened to me. I had just witnessed. But Alina it had happened to her. And so you had someone that had been in that exact position that you had been in.
Maybe you've probably already come to terms with this in your own therapy, Ilana, but like, I just want you to know that, like, I don't think any of your, I'm using air quotes, failure to support Judith is in any way, shape, or form, like, because you failed. I think it was just a really difficult situation and you did the best you could. And I can imagine that if the situation were reversed, literally reversed, where Judith had children and you were having your first child and they died, like, I can imagine it would have been really difficult. And the same, like, I think it was the nature of your relationship and just the situation was so extraordinarily hard.
Yeah.
Like, I don't see a situation here where someone was not trying. I see a situation where someone was trying desperately and it just wasn't working for whatever reason, for many reasons.
Well, I remember I remember saying, like, why don't you feel like this? Like, why aren't you as devastated as I am? And you were just like, I don't know what to say. I'm just not.
Like, you were his mother. You were his mother. You were his mother.
To all of our wonderful new friends, we want to hear from you. Email us at aslongasimlivingpodcast@gmail.com and follow us on Instagram at aslongasimlivingpodcast. We'll get back to you as soon as our grieving brains allow.
Yay!